Thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon. Yesterday, we released our monthly jobs report, and it showed a very clear theme that Oregon's economic recovery is going to be very slow. Although our unemployment rate dropped significantly from 11.6% in June down to 10.4% in July, that still leaves it at more than 3 times what it was back in March. We're still experiencing a very deep recession. We anticipate continuing to see a steady stream of people filing for benefits. We are processing those claims much more quickly now, but how this plays out going forward depends a lot on the volatile and unknown course of the virus. So far, we have paid out an astounding $3.9 billion since the start of this pandemic, and we've received more than 680,000 claims for benefits. That's including all the different benefit programs, and we do know that there are some duplicate applications in those claims. This slow recovery that we're dealing with is one of the reasons why we're so closely following state and federal legislation and working with our state legislature and congressional delegation to see how to get more relief to Oregonians. This remains a very real crisis for Oregonians, and it remains a very real crisis for us, which is why we're continuing to work as hard and as fast as possible to help people. One of the things being considered is additional payments under the Lost Wage Assistance Program. That was a program announced in a presidential memorandum. Since we spoke last week, we've received several pieces of guidance from FEMA and from the U.S. Department of Labor. Those two federal agencies both have pieces of the oversight and direction for how that program is administered. That guidance has answered many of the questions that we had. It doesn't answer all of them, and there are still some significant unknowns, including how much it would cost Oregon taxpayers to implement this program. Some of the things that have been clarified include FEMA saying that they give states 3 weeks worth of benefits initially, and after that, they pay out benefits 1 week at a time until the available funds are exhausted. Most projections are anticipating that there's about 5 weeks of benefits that will be funded. If that's true, then that means next week would be the last week that those additional benefits would be available. The amount of benefits are either $300 or $400 per week. Most states that have applied so far are doing the $300 because to increase it to $400 per week, states have to provide their own funding for that additional $100 payment. And all states, including Oregon, are facing very real budget crises. The cost of administering these additional benefits is paid by FEMA, but only 3/4 of the cost. The remaining quarter of the cost has to be paid by states, either through state taxes or other revenues. Federal rules do not permit us to use our unemployment insurance administrative funds to administer this new additional payment program. We're reviewing this program very closely. We're working with other states. We're working with federal agencies, reviewing the guidance and exploring how much help this will provide Oregonians and how quickly we would be able to implement it. One thing is clear is that this program is not enough to address all of Oregonians' needs. We continue to hope for a more robust, longer-term, and comprehensive solution to provide the needed support for Oregonians in need. Besides this lost wage assistance program, there are a lot of other changes and proposed changes to the unemployment insurance system. The amount of change and the pace of change in the UI system is really unprecedented. One of those changes is Senate Bill 1701, which was recently passed by the Oregon State Legislature, which increases how much somebody can earn in a week before it starts to reduce their weekly benefits. This will take us some time to implement. It will provide benefit to people, but we won't be able to provide that benefit immediately. The good news is that people do not have to change how they're filing their benefits. They continue to file and report their earnings the same way. And as soon as we're able to update our systems to reflect the statutory change, any retroactive adjustments to payments will be issued. With Senate Bill 1701 and with all of the other already passed changes and considered possible changes to the unemployment system, we continue to prioritize those programs that will help the most people the most as quickly as possible. This means that we can't do everything at once, but it means that we're going to help as many people as quickly as we can. In terms of Senate Bill 1701, this certainly will provide assistance to a number of Oregonians receiving unemployment benefits, but it wouldn't provide as much help as, for instance, a new benefit program to replace the FPUC $600 payments that ended several weeks ago. For that reason, we would prioritize doing the work necessary to implement Senate Bill 1701 lower, and it would take place after we implement any additional benefit program. It would also be prioritized after the work that we're dedicated to doing to pay people for the waiting week. In terms of processing claims and getting people payments, we continue to staff up and hit a significant landmark where we now have about 1,100 people processing claims. That's a 1,000% increase from the 100 people that we had just prior to the pandemic. This is vital because our unemployment insurance system was set up requiring each claim to be looked at individually, and that can mean looking at most of those claims each week. Having the right amount of people with the experience and training to handle this is key to handling the ongoing work needed to support Oregonians. We've been asked several times whether we're better prepared now than we were in early March to handle any further increase in claims activity. And the answer is, well, we certainly want to do more. We are very much better prepared now. We have many more people, they are more experienced, and we have refined a lot of our processes and tools. The number of people who have not yet received all of their payments is shrinking, although we know it's not shrinking quickly enough. For regular unemployment insurance claims, we're within the normal 21-day window for processing those. We're actually processing them quicker than we were before the pandemic. For PUA claims, we're processing those in about 4 to 6 weeks. We do know that there are still too many people who have issues on their claims that are stopping them from being paid or from being fully paid. The causes of this vary widely because there are so many different programs and different situations that people are in. For regular unemployment insurance, the largest contributor to this situation is adjudication, and that continues to be something that we're focused on making improvements and working to get people their benefits as quickly as possible. In the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, one of the largest issues is determining whether people are not working due to a qualifying COVID-19 impact reason, as is required by the Federal CARES Act legislation. We're also still experiencing some challenges with PIN reset issues, and we're working hard to address those. On the adjudication front, another change that we made very recently is we have entered into a contract with a vendor to bring on an additional 50 people who will help gather information so that we can speed up the adjudication process. These people will be supplementing the work being done by the hundreds of new adjudicators that we've hired and the existing core of experienced adjudicators who are working through those claims as quickly as we can. We've talked about our new website, which provides updates on the various programs. That website is now translated into Spanish, and that's part of our larger and more intentional commitment to equity. This is a very large translation project, and we're proud to have worked with local translators to provide this important resource. And we continue this work to make sure that we're serving everyone in need. We're currently testing the Vietnamese version of the website, which we hope to launch in the coming days. We announced last week that we will be having a webinar tomorrow to help people fill out the Spanish version of the PUA online form, and that webinar will be conducted in Spanish. To share a little bit about the numbers of claims and where we are, between March 15th and August 15th, 548,000 initial claims for regular unemployment insurance have been filed. That compares to about 61,600 during the same time last year. We continue to process those claims, to do the initial processing very quickly. We have just about 1,400 claims that haven't yet been processed, and the oldest of those, including the most complex, is from August 5th. So we're handling those very quickly and getting benefits out to most people on regular unemployment insurance very quickly. In the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, We've paid $100 million in benefits to over 42,300 people. We continue to identify the barriers to the remaining people who are eligible to those benefits, and we're working to resolve those more and more quickly. I've been sharing numbers about our work-share participation, and since March 15th, we've had over 1,500 employers using the work-share program. That represents more than 63,000 workers who have received $49 million in benefits under that program alone. For context of how robust Oregon's work-share program is, in July, we paid out $20.7 million in work-share benefits. According to US Department of Labor data, this is second in the nation and is only surpassed by the state of New York, which paid out $22.8 million. So this has been an invaluable tool for Oregon businesses and workers to help keep people working at least part-time during these very troubling times. And with the CARES Act funding the work-share benefits, this helps us further protect Oregon's trust fund for Oregon businesses. We know that getting through to our employees on the telephone continues to be too difficult, and we're doing ongoing dedicated work with the multiple vendors involved to make this better. We have made some progress. We know it's not enough, but we are currently answering more than 5 times as many calls per day as we were before. Looking at the end of May, we are answering about 525 calls in a day. On August 17th, the most recent full day that we have the data for, we answered over 2,800 calls. So again, this is real progress, and we're absolutely committed to increasing that progress so it is easier and easier for people to contact us. One way that people can help is by contacting us through the online form, the Contact Us form on our new webpage. We're continuing to hire more people and provide more training to the people that we already have hired. And we're continuing to advance our modernization project. We've built a very talented team of leaders, project managers, and experts, and we'll continue to report out our progress over the coming weeks and months. We are well positioned to modernize our systems in a way that will help Oregonians get the benefits they deserve in the future, even during such difficult situations as we're facing now. More Oregonians than ever before in history are receiving unemployment benefits from the Employment Department. It's been an extraordinary effort to do this, and it continues to be an extraordinary effort. Reviewing record numbers of claims each week takes the record number of employees that we now have working, and it requires them to work incredibly hard. I again want to thank our incredibly dedicated employees who are putting their hearts into this work because they know how much it helps people and how much people are relying on us to get them their benefits. Our employees are pushing themselves incredibly hard to help their fellow Oregonians. There have been many, many challenges, and while many remain, we have been able to overcome a number of them. We are in a much better place now to process claims and to pay benefits to people. While serious challenges remain, we are moving in the right direction, and we have more and more positive momentum. Thank you all, and with that, I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thanks, David. Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian. Please go ahead, Jamie.
Hi, David. Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to follow up on the funding from the executive order that FEMA is administering. Several states have already applied for that funding and have been approved to receive it. Why hasn't Oregon applied at this point? And is there a timeline for when a decision can be made on whether Oregon will apply?
So there's a deadline of September 10th for states to apply. We certainly do not want to wait until then. And it's really a matter of getting enough information to make sure we're making the best decision. We know that it will provide some assistance to Oregonians, but as I mentioned, the assistance is much shorter term than is needed to adequately help people as much as needed. And there are real costs to the state that will be borne by Oregonians. There's the 25% cost of administering the program. Up until as recently as late Monday, we were still receiving additional guidance on how some key parts of the program will operate. So we really need to have enough information to know that we're moving forward responsibly. We continue to hope for a longer term solution, but we're working with the governor's office, with all kinds of interested parties to make sure that we're making a good decision and hope to move forward in the days to come with a decision, at least about whether we anticipate applying.
Okay, and then just clarifying questions on two things you mentioned there. With the back, it sounded like if you guys were to apply, it would be backdated from when the program ended to potentially 5 weeks beyond that, as opposed to beginning at the point the funding was received. And then the other clarification there was there would still be a 25% administrative cost, even if Oregon wasn't implementing that extra $100.
So in terms of the backdating, yes, it's effective retroactive to the first week after the federal FPUC $600 payment program ended. So we would apply, and what FEMA is doing is giving states initial funds to pay for 3 weeks of benefits, and then just paying additional weeks until they run out of money. When they run out of money depends on a number of things, including whether there are natural disasters that take away some of those disaster recovery funds, which is the pool of money that this is coming from. So I think that addresses the retroactivity piece. In terms of the state responsibility, there is a 25% match that is required for this type of FEMA grant. And our understanding at this point is that we would be responsible for paying for 25% of the administrative costs of the program. And finding the source for that income is one of the big things that we need to make sure we have a good solution for.
Thanks, Jamie. Lindsay Nadrich, please go ahead.
Hey, David. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up and make sure I understood. I know you said that, it depends on how much money is left for that. But it sounded like you said projections are about 5 weeks of benefits funded, and last week would be the last week. So with the extra 3, I just want to make sure I understood what you said. The 300 to 400 would only go through, like, what, July 25th was when the $600 ended, and then through last week. Is that what you mean?
So what FEMA has said is that they will give you that first 3 weeks of benefits. So there's not an etched in stone guarantee, but it looks very reliable that those first 3 weeks of benefits would be provided. That third week was last calendar week. They'll continue to give states additional weeks of benefits, kind of 1 week at a time, until the money is exhausted. And the third-party projections and estimates that I've seen are that it would last about 5 weeks. If it does last 5 weeks, then the week number 5 that those benefits would be payable for would be next week. And one of our concerns is that it will take us time to implement this program. And if there's a subsequent congressional solution that provides additional, more robust support, that would also take time to implement. And we really don't want to be in a situation of doing our best to get the small benefit being offered now into people's hands, and that impeding our ability to get a more robust support system in place quickly if there is congressional action that's taken to provide additional support.
Okay, but for now, you guys haven't applied yet, and there's no date as to when this could happen for people.
Correct. We have not applied. As I said, we're still getting guidance. The most recent piece that was formally issued was late Monday. It has answered a lot of the questions so far, but certainly not all of them. So even the states that have applied and received funds, many of them don't know yet when they'll be able to actually start paying them. I believe only one state has made any payments. Other states that have already received the funds or received the commitment from FEMA for the funds, most of them still don't know when they'll actually be able to get those benefits into the hands of the people that need the assistance.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Okay, Kate Davidson with OPB. Please go ahead, Kate.
Hey, thanks. A couple, I guess, detailed questions. The 25% administrative cost. Do you have a ballpark for what that would be in dollars?
We don't really. We're still figuring out exactly what it would look like to implement. There's also a 5% cap on how much of the on how much of the grant that FEMA provides can be used for administrative costs. So as we think through all the possibilities, that's certainly something that we need to keep in mind when we're figuring out the cost, but we really don't have a good sense right now of what the dollars would be to implement that program.
I want to ask you about the Oregon OSHA draft rules that came out this week, sort of solidifying what could be face mask and physical distancing and barrier usage in offices across Oregon. Have you read those rules, and would they change anything about how OED's call centers and contact centers are set up right now, including the possibility of requiring across the board mask usage?
So I have not read the rules in detail. I actually had them open until we were starting this this press event because I am going through them. So I don't yet know if it would require any changes. I know that we have continued to make additional improvements and provide additional safety measures constantly in all of our workplaces, including adding more physical barriers. So that's certainly something that we're looking at. We're kind of constantly evaluating how we can further support the safety of our workers.
Thanks, Kate. Tom Cusack, please go ahead. Tom Cusack, please go ahead. Bill Puller with the Statesman Journal. Please go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, hey, David. So I'm curious about the Modernization Project. I know it's been going on a long time as far as the state's concerned. What's the status of that? Where's it at right now?
So we're getting close to issuing a notice of intent to award with the vendor that we intend to contract with to build the unemployment insurance solutions for the tax and benefits administration systems. As we're doing that, we continue to go over the very detailed plans that were created to get approval to get to this stage of the process. I think I've mentioned in the past, there are many plans that you have to complete to show that you've done your due diligence, that you have good ways of handling staffing, budget, changes to the program, all of the risks that are attendant with any type of large project like this. We have those plans before we start negotiating the details of a contract. We want to make sure that they are up to date and reflect recent experiences with the pandemic and otherwise. So our teams are going through those. We're continuing to look at what type of work needs to be done to prepare to transfer from our legacy systems to new systems without there being a break or interruption in our ability to get benefits to people. So we're continuing to work very hard doing that. We're continuing to staff up in the modernization area also, and doing basically preparing to do the very detailed planning of what type of work we'll be doing in which months and when we think we'll be going live, and making sure that we have all the right supports in planning there to do that successfully. These are incredibly complicated projects, and we've put together some really solid plans, and we have some really good people that are working to refine those. So it's always intimidating, I think, to undertake a project of this scale, but I think that we're in a really good situation to do that successfully and to end up with a really good outcome for Oregonians.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I wonder, is there any estimate on how long it could take to get all of that done? Because it sounds like it's going to be a lot of work.
I think every part of the project is a lot of work. So some of the work will be ongoing as we're doing the contract negotiations. In terms of giving concrete timelines for when things will happen, it's really hard to do until we get into those detailed negotiations with the vendor. Different vendors have different kind of general approaches to the development process and how long that takes and the staging. So that's something that when we get into the detailed negotiations, we work through that to see how it would work. And of course, how we're able to do that without disrupting the payment of benefits, which we're focused on.
Thanks, Bill. Next, Mike Rogaway with the Oregonian. Please go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, and hi, David. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So forgive me if I missed this at the very beginning, but with the executive order, you'd have to use you can't use state funds, state unemployment funds for the administrative funds to pay the benefits. But I understood correctly last week, and from the original order, you can use trust fund money to pay it. Is that right? If you wanted to.
There's two different pieces. The FEMA grants generally require a 25% match overall. So when you look at that $300 to $400 range of benefits, the $100 is the state's 25% contribution towards the total amount that is going to people. States are given an option of how to provide their $100 contribution. Most states are taking the option, which is to use the existing trust fund payments that are going to people to be the state's contribution. What that in effect does is it says the payments that we're already giving people counts as the state's 25% share. That would mean that people were only getting an additional $300 in benefits. That's what most states are doing because they're already paying the benefits from the trust fund. They do not have the additional money to pay from another source an additional $100 of benefits that people get a $400 plus up. That requirement and how it works for the benefit payments themselves is different from the administrative costs. The money that's in the unemployment insurance trust fund can't be used to pay administrative costs for the regular unemployment insurance program either. It's really there just for the benefits. So for the administrative costs, it can't be out of the trust fund and it can't be the administrative funding that we get from the federal government to run the UI program. It would have to be some other funding source.
Got it. But if Oregon wanted to pay the additional $100 to get it up to $400, we could draw on the trust fund, right?
I believe that that's true. I'm hesitating just a little bit because there's been a lot of very technical pieces of guidance. I believe that you can do the extra 100 out of the trust fund, but I'm not 100% certain without
How would
talking.
Oregon make the decision on whether or not to do that?
I'm sorry?
How would Oregon make a decision on whether or not to do that?
I think if it cannot come out of the trust fund, then that would really be something that would require legislative approval because that would be a significant allocation of state revenues. And it's something that the employment department doesn't have that revenue and doesn't have the authority to obligate in that way. If it can be taken out of the trust fund, then that's something that we are regularly doing modeling to project out how much we'll be collecting in contributions and how much we'll be paying out in benefits. We look at that very carefully. Businesses pay into that fund. So we're very cognizant of that. We want to protect the trust fund and keep employer taxes as low as possible. But that type of projection work is something that we're doing all the time. And that's kind of in the background when I've talked before about us feeling confident that our trust fund is in good shape. It's based on those ongoing projections of looking at how much is in there, how much we'll collect, and how much we anticipate spending.
That would ultimately be your department's decision, though, rather than the legislature's. Is that right?
If it can come out of the trust fund, that is something that is within the purview of the employment department to decide, correct?
Thanks.
Lauren Negrete with KMTR. Please go ahead, Lauren. Lauren Negrete with KMTR. Dick Hughes, please go ahead, Dick.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. One is about the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Program, which I have not been paying a lot of attention to, and I probably should have. I'm hearing from people who applied 8 weeks ago for that extension, and I've received nothing as far as either payments or notification. Why is that? And can you give us an update on that program? And again, I apologize for not having been as familiar with it as I should be as a journalist.
There's no need to apologize. I think part of my answer really centers around the fact that there are lots of programs and lots of complexities and problems with how they work with each other. So it is hard to stay focused on all of them. In terms of what's going on in individual claims, it's hard to say. When we implemented the program that you're talking to, which we refer to as PEUC, we were able to create a system that for some people automatically moves them from their regular unemployment insurance claim into the PEUC claim. That isn't the case for everyone. It actually had some retroactive elements to people who are eligible, and that requires somebody looking at each claim. And this is another program where it requires us at each calendar quarter to reevaluate whether people are eligible for any other type of benefits before we pay them the PEUC benefits. So it gets very complex as to which programs someone can be in. And when they exhaust their regular benefits, some people become eligible for a new claim of regular benefits. Some people become eligible for PEUC. Some people become eligible for PUA. So knowing what happened in a particular case is difficult. For those cases where that move from their prior claim into the PEUC benefit program does not happen automatically, really encourage people to contact us using the form on our public website. The PEUC program is one where that contact us form really helped us quickly address those in a much more sustainable manner. So when we're getting requests from people where they're raising an issue about them moving onto the PEUC program, we're able to address those quite quickly when they submit it through the Contact Us form. That avoids them having to wait on hold, and it means that the phone lines are open for people who may have to call in to get other issues addressed. So in terms of advice, that's what I would suggest. We are able to work through those pretty quickly. And again, I can't really give you a specific of what might have happened with an individual person's claim. It could be that if someone had wages out of state, for instance, recently, that even though they were receiving benefits in Oregon, we have to communicate with the other state when the calendar quarter changes to see whether they would just move on to a PEUC claim. So it could be any one of a number of things.
Thank you very much for that explanation. That's helpful. I have one general follow-up question. You've made tremendous progress, but we continue to hear stories, and I haven't verified them, but I presume they're true, of people who've been waiting from, I don't know, 19 weeks to 6 months or 5 months with no word on what's happening. And so are those all cases stuck in adjudication? Is it true they're not being informed of the process? I'm just trying to make sense of some of the things I'm hearing out there in the community. Thank you.
Sure, and that is one of the challenges that we face. You know, when we received this onslaught of claims, it started out with the regular unemployment insurance program, and then it quickly grew to those other programs that we were just talking about, PUA, PEUC, also extended benefits, and many of the other programs that are out there. There are unfortunately still too many people that haven't been paid who filed too long ago. The number of people in that situation has dropped drastically, and how long, kind of the longest of those people that we know of have waited has also gone down. This is another area where unfortunately it's really hard to give a specific answer. We do our best to communicate with people about what's going on. If people are in adjudication, once it's assigned to an adjudicator, they get contacted. When people claim a week of benefits, they do receive a notice if they're not receiving a payment. Unfortunately, those notices aren't as helpful as we would like because they tend to be pretty generic, frequently essentially just saying there's an issue with your claim that we need to look into. That may be an adjudication issue or it may be something else. We're continuing to work through those. I think probably other than adjudication, the biggest area where we're seeing these challenges is in the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. And there it's really a matter where we have made huge progress. And when you think about taking a program from not existing to having paid out $111 million in a few months, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of progress. It's helped so many people. It's also been incredibly difficult. And particularly as we rushed to get a program out there as quickly as we could, and then identified what some of the problems and challenges were and went back to make changes, particularly if someone had a claim that has existed through several iterations of changes. It is a challenge to make sure that the claim always moves smoothly through. That's one of the reasons why we have the Contact Us form, so that if people have been waiting a really long time, we want to know that, we want to address it as quickly as we possibly can, and why we've created and continue to create more queries essentially of our computer systems to try to identify any claims that might not be getting moved along as they're intended to be, so that we can then have our experts hone in on those and address them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Megan Wilgoose with KTVL. Please go ahead, Megan.
Hi, David. Thank you for doing this today. Last time we spoke 2 months ago, you mentioned the team to speed up the claim process that you hired, and you mentioned that again today. And although it's hard to tell, do you have a time frame for when these claims will be processed? Because people are sharing their concern with us about, like, by December if they don't receive their money when their taxes need to be claimed.
And Megan, are you talking about the claims that are in adjudication, I assume?
Yes, we can focus on that.
So giving a target date, and I apologize for saying this so often, but it is hard to give an exact date. As we work through claims each week that anybody is claiming, there's the potential for there to be an issue that triggers a legal obligation on our part to do the adjudication process. So there's kind of a constant inflow of new issues. And with hundreds of thousands of people claiming benefits, even with a small percentage of those having issues arise each week, it's still a significant number. So we have hired hundreds of new employees to do the adjudication work. They've started going through training. Many of them, we have people at various stages of the training. We have drastically shortened the training period so that some of them are already focused in on actively working and resolving cases. And the pace of how quickly they're able to go through that is going to increase a lot. And I'm sorry, I can't quantify that. We're watching as closely as we can, and as we're able to quantify that for ourselves, we're happy to share that. It's just something with so many moving variables, it's hard to see. The contract that I mentioned that we entered into to have 50 additional people, this is a new approach. So we know that it will help. It's hard to say how much it will help, and we anticipate it will take a little bit of time for us to really get that working as smoothly as possible. We're committed to working with the vendor, and they've been really good about being dedicated to jumping in and helping us as much as possible. They've shared a real concern about the members in their community, and there's kind of that shared commitment to getting benefits out as quickly as we can. The Benefits While You Wait program is another tool that we're using. It has not, frankly, been able to scale up as quickly as we had hoped, but we have identified some of the barriers, and we're continuing to make adjustments to increase the pace that we're able to get people benefits under that program even before the adjudication process is done. So I can't give you a definite date. I can tell you that from my perspective, saying that the cases that we have now won't be adjudicated until December is not acceptable. And we're doing absolutely everything that we can to get through them as quickly as we can. And we're continuing to look for new opportunities to do that and new ways to make the process go more quickly.
Of course, thank you. And just to follow up, I spoke to a woman who's been waiting 18 weeks now for a claim, and she feels the employment department is hoping people kind of just like sweep what they're owed under the rug and walk away and find a new job. I just wanted to like hear what your reaction is on this.
That's painful to hear, and I'll be real explicit. We do not want that. These are benefits that people are entitled to. We know that the vast majority of people need it desperately. We want them to get the benefits. We really are doing everything that we can to get them the benefits as quickly as possible. Even if it's not quickly enough, those benefits are owed to those people. We don't want people to give up. Please do continue to file weekly claims. if you've been waiting 18 weeks and you haven't heard, please do reach out to us through the Contact Us form. Again, we are prioritizing those people who have been waiting the longest. So if somebody has been waiting 3 weeks and they're anxious to hear something, we understand. We want to get to them as quickly as possible, but we would be responding to that person that you mentioned who's been waiting 18 weeks. We would prioritize getting back to them and working on their claim first.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan. Next, Keaton Thomas with KATU. Please go ahead, Keaton.
Hi, David. Thanks again for doing this. I guess my question, you touched on this earlier. I want to revisit the federal program, but as people don't have the extra $600 now, why not, like other states may have done, and I don't know the other states, but why not just apply for the implementation of that FEMA program and then ask those additional questions later on in order to get benefits to people quickly?
Sure. We don't, if we thought that that would get money to people more quickly, we certainly would. Before we can actually get the money to people, we would need to know how to administer it. Frankly, everything that we're seeing about the approval process once a state submits its application is that that goes quite quickly. So that is not going to be a barrier. If we decide on whatever day that yes, Oregon is going to do this, we think that the risk to Oregon taxpayers of paying expenses to get these benefits out is worth it. We've had the right discussions with people and we submit our application. We anticipate that we would receive the response within a couple of days, and it will take more than a couple of days to get those payments out. Some states, I was looking at Utah, for instance, which has probably one of the best functioning unemployment systems in the nation. They have applied, they have received confirmation that they will be paying the benefits. Their estimate is that it will take them 3 weeks before they're able to actually get money into people's hands. Most other states haven't been able to come up with a timeline estimate yet, but it's frankly likely to be longer than that for most states. So applying, whether we apply today, tomorrow, or the day that we have enough answers so that we know even more details about how we'll implement, wouldn't really impact the timing of when we're able to get benefits to people. We're not letting that slow down the work to figure out how we could do it.
A related question, but in the meantime, while you guys are trying to figure out that federal program, and I guess if Congress does something, are you, and then while we're also waiting for the waiting week and then SB 1701, are you working on parts of these implementation projects in the meantime, or do you have to do it all at once? Does that make sense? Like, while we're waiting, can we do the waiting week right now and then revisit it another time?
And I'm not an IT expert, so I'll preface my answer with that. Nobody is sitting around waiting. Our IT team is constantly over capacity for the work that they're doing. So I know right now they're working on several things to keep our systems going. I mentioned that we became aware of an issue with PIN resets. Whenever issues like that arise, and there are more of them when you have a lot of new programs that have been implemented, our IT team is jumping in to figure out what's going on and to fix those as quickly as possible. We also have lots of other work to finish implementing things that were created by the CARES Act. One of the things that I don't know that I've talked explicitly about, I've mentioned repeatedly that our focus is on getting the benefits out the door as quickly as we can. That is not the end of the implementation from our perspective. So with all of these new programs, we have really prioritized getting the benefits out. Even after we do that, there's a lot of required work that has to be done. These are federal dollars in most cases, and even when it's the State Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, there are federal requirements. We have to submit reports that show particular data. It has to be done in a certain way. There has to be data validation that's done according to federal standards. All of that is incredibly time intensive for our IT team, and they are still doing a lot of that work for the CARES Act programs that we've already been paying benefits out to people on. So they're still working really hard constantly to get that done. Some of the work can be done kind of bits and pieces in parallel. So we have been looking more and more at the waiting week work in terms of sitting down and getting through lots of the coding. That hasn't been done, but a lot of the planning and kind of plotting the course for how the coding will be done, and that's an important part of an IT project like this. They have been doing that whenever opportunities arise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keaton. Next, Morgan Romero with KGW. Please go ahead, Morgan.
Hi, David. Hey, thanks for doing this. Perfect segue into the question I was going to ask. Several people that we've heard from, in fact, an individual I interviewed today received money for a waiting week while others have not. What is that about, and what's the latest on the waiting week updates?
So we have not paid people the waiting week. My best guess as to what's going on is that if somebody is receiving benefits under the PUA program, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program does not have a waiting week. And because this was a brand new program that was created from scratch, I think we've shared, and you all have shared experiences that you've heard from people about the painful parts of that, where we had to stand something up very quickly. It wasn't as user-friendly as we wanted, and we've had a lot of challenges and unexpected issues with how it works at times. One of the advantages that we had, though, was that it wasn't built on decades of code that had that waiting week kind of baked into it. So the really intricate work of unthreading the waiting week from the kind of maze of systems that the regular unemployment system is on, we didn't have that with PUA. So people that are receiving PUA benefits do get paid for that first week. That's technically not a waiting week. Nobody who has a waiting week has yet received payment for that. The one other scenario that might lead people to believe they got paid for what is a waiting week is if someone previously was receiving regular unemployment benefits on a claim, had gone back to work, for instance, and then started receiving benefits again on the same claim. There's one waiting week per claim. So if they hadn't yet used up their old claim and they kind of reopened that prior claim, they would have started receiving benefits immediately because they already served their waiting week maybe 9 months ago.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, we've heard from a couple people now who believe that they received the waiting week that were just receiving regular unemployment insurance. But yeah, we'll get back to them on that. And then kind of on a different note, a follow-up question as it relates to PUA. Some people have told us that when they go to file their weekly PUA claim, you know, they get this invalid credentials message basically saying the system is inundated, it's overwhelmed, and now they're not receiving confirmation numbers. Was that just a glitch? Was that temporary? What's going on in those scenarios?
So the message that you mentioned about invalid credentials is part of the issue that I mentioned with the PIN resets. So that's something that we're actively working on right now, and we hope to get resolved absolutely as soon as possible.
Thanks, Morgan. Ben Layton with Fox 12, please go ahead. Ben Layton with Fox 12. Next, Althea Billings with Cable News. Please go ahead, Althea. Are there any reporters on the line or media outlets rather that have not had an opportunity to ask David questions? If so, please go ahead.
I'd love to ask a follow-up question, if that's okay. It's Kate from OPB. I'm just wondering who the vendor is who's supplying the 50 people for adjudication.
Sure, the name of the vendor is Epic. They're a Beaverton company.
Thank you.
This is
this is Dick Hughes. I have a follow-up question, if that's okay. You've hired a number of people and transferred some people. So how are you paying for all these additional employees? And Are they permanent employees? What happens when life goes back to normal as far as claims, assuming it does, which we hope it does. What happens to all these new employees?
Sure. Those are complicated things. In terms of the payment, the regular unemployment insurance program is one where we regularly get our funding level adjusted based on the number of people filing claims. So whenever there's a recession, although this one, certainly the depth of it and the speed that it came on is something that's never been seen before. But whenever we go into a recession and we see more claims, we get additional federal money to help pay for the additional workload. In this recession, there have been a couple of additional things. The Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, which was back in mid-March, allocated some additional administrative funds to each state to help pay for the additional work beyond just more workload. It was recognized that this was something very different. So that has helped. And a number of the CARES Act programs, so the PUA program, a number of those came with additional federal funds to pay for the administration of those programs. We've also been communicating with our state partners. So during the special session that the state legislature had, for instance, they provided some additional authority to us to spend that additional money that was coming in and to have additional positions. Most of the positions that we're hiring are limited duration. And again, the scale and speed of this is different, but the employment department regularly is faced with constant fluctuations and workload needs. One of the advantages that we have is when we have to hire up like this, we're hiring lots and lots of people when there are tons of people looking for work. When our workload starts to go down and we're starting to have fewer positions, it's because the economy is doing better and there's lots of employers that are hiring. So we've been historically very good at making those adjustments without ever having to do layoffs or anything like that. People start looking for other jobs. We help people find new jobs. We have promotional opportunities. Unfortunately, I think that part of the cycle of us scaling back down is probably quite a ways off. Even if the economy improves quicker than we anticipate, the work that we have to do just based on what is currently in the system will persist for many months.